gonna go hang out over there today. Let's get into position. Hello, my beautiful nature. It's good to see you today. Ahoy! Thank you for joining me once again here in the woods. I am your host, Danielle Des Maravet Hernandez. Haha, I'm a mouthful. Today we're talking about The Slipper and the Rose. The Slipper and the Rose is a British production of Cinderella, and this version, in this version, the prince is as much the main character as our Cinderella. So much so that the film begins by following his trek back home where he has had an unsuccessful venture. Simultaneously, the camera follows a funeral procession as Cinderella finds her way home. Yes, folks, not only does she have a dead mom, but she also has a dead dad. So this is the funeral procession for her father. They make it back home where she is told she is now the staff. That's right, in this version, she's replacing the cook, the cleaner, the butler, the housemaids, the ladies' maid. She's doing the job of 20 people. Huh, so abuse, check. Now let's check in on that prince of ours. The prince is returning home because he was sent as an envoy to wed a princess so that they would unite their kingdoms, because he's from a very small kingdom called Euphrania. And this prince has a name. His name is Prince Edward. Edward has disappointed the king and the queen because he has refused to marry this woman. You see, Edward is conflicted because Edward wants to marry for love. That's right, in this version, it's the prince who wants to marry for love. So much so that they create the ball. A bride finding ball. A bride finding ball. Oh, that's right, this is a musical version, baby. The Slipper and the Rose has all original music, and it is fantastic. Oh, the sun has faded. A bride finding ball. A bride finding ball. You see, the king has determined that there's no woman good enough for the prince, and that's not what it is. The prince wants to have a connection with the person that he'll be binding himself to for his lifetime. That's the difference. So they come up with the idea for the ball right at the start of the film. The film wastes no time. It's like, hi, here's the prince, he needs a ball. Stat! So our prince is conflicted. He understands that as the crown prince, he has moral obligations and responsibilities to the crown and the throne. But as a man, he has desires and needs and wants to find love. And uniting those two seems to be impossible for him. He even has a song where he questions, why can't I be two people? Yes, why can't he live two separate lives? So the prince thinks it's ridiculous, but he'll put up with it because he's getting on in years. It also really represents how the marriage mark sort of served women up on a platter, because he's got a cousin who also is in need of a wife, and his very line is, once you make your choice, I shall make mine. Like they're at a buffet of women. So it's really about the prince finding himself, finding what he wants in life, and reconciling his royal duties with his human needs. Traveling back over to Cinderella, she has just had her second parent pass. She takes a trip over to the cemetery. The cemetery is actually the first time that she gets to see the prince. This is also the first Cinderella that really confronts death as part of life, which is really great because while she's at the cemetery reflecting on better days when she was loved, as the song goes, once I was loved, the prince and his companion John are entering the royal crypt, in which he's visiting the kings that have passed, and he talks about how no matter what he does or the choices that he makes, this is where he will end up. It's a really cute song. It's not nihilistic at all. He simply reflects that no matter what happens in life, there's a final resting place. And so what do we want to do with our life while we're here? It's pretty fantastic. Now, something that makes this version incredibly unique is that it really focuses on the roles in life. It focuses on the roles of servants versus the roles of public servants, which the prince is. So Cinderella catches the prince's entire song and dance in the family crypt, and it is an entire song and dance, and it is great. They're doing straight up acrobatics over tunes. Quality filming. So our Cinderella sees the prince dancing in the crypt, weird but funny, and then following that, they don't meet again until the ball. She runs away, but he sees her. He notices her from outside the window. So already they're aware of each other without being aware that they're aware of each other. Fast forward. Now, there's another important critical person to this tale. The Fairy Godmother. This version reveals that even the Fairy Godmother is not exempt from being a servant. She shows up, and she shows up the test. She doesn't just come over to Cinderella and be like, you're going to the ball. No. In this version, when she meets Cinderella, it's through an act of meeting something. She arrives one day at the basement. Cinderella expresses that she's not supposed to let anyone in, but Cinderella is kind. It's a cold, windy night. She lets the woman sit by the fireplace and share a meal with her, and passes the test. This is something that's very common in old fairy tales and mythology. You get tested, you get a reward. You get tested and fail, you get a punishment. Cinderella gets a reward. So, one of her rewards is a dog. When the Fairy Godmother comes in, a little animal companion comes in too. So, connection to nature, check. So, let's assess where we are so far. For our Cinderella, she's lost both her parents. She is in a cycle of abuse and overwork. She is doing her best, but she's not a team of 20, so her best is never going to be enough for the stepmother and the stepdaughters. I forgot to share their names. The stepdaughters are Isabella and Palatine. So the Fairy Godmother leaves and leaves a little wink for Cinderella by doing all the kitchen work for her, and the stepmother just loves to overload Cinderella. So she comes downstairs, sees this meal for 40 people prepared essentially, and she's like, well, I'll have to find more for you to do. So this version looks at servants, it looks at our roles in life, it looks at our responsibilities. The king himself is filling a role. He has an entire scene with his governing men and reveals that he's essentially an inept king. He doesn't know his own rules, he doesn't know his own vocabulary half the time, and it's a hilarious number called Protocolically Correct. They sing this whole number, who to invite, who not to invite, who do we need to unite the kingdom with? And then an entire envoy scene happens of people inviting others to the ball, in which you see not every country wants an invitation to this ball. Some of those messengers straight up got shot. Just like they say, don't shoot the messenger. They didn't get that memo. This is a fun version. You don't traditionally see these scenes in other Cinderellas, but this Cinderella is not exclusively about her, is it? No. This Cinderella is about the prince and his quest and what it's like on his side to have to be signed up for this ball with no hope of meeting anyone, with the chance encounter that he genuinely gets along with this woman from the start, which we'll get to. So over here we have everyone getting ready for the ball because not enough royals agreed to go, so they invited the members of the kingdom. And when they do that, there's a fabric shortage because everyone has to make the most beautiful dress. And when that happens, the stepmother decides Cinderella will simply unpick the gowns that they currently have and redesign them into fashionable new gowns, which means now, on top of being the entire staff, she's also a costume designer. And of course, our Cinderella is hopelessly bad at it. She's sort of ruined the gowns because this is not her forte. She's not a seamstress. Here we go. Now we have the Fairy Godmother to the rescue. So, the little dog companion goes to get the Fairy Godmother, and the Fairy Godmother is revealed to be a servant. She's essentially slaving away in her quarters. She's writing tales for Scheherazade, which is from 1001 Nights. She is talking to Hansel and Gretel, who are currently pigeons in a coop. She has a lot of fairy tales that she has to accomplish. Cinderella is not her only gig, which I think is hilarious. She also reveals that she cannot do magic for herself. She can only serve others. And she makes this statement. She says, "Sometimes I wish we had never been invented at all." Which is telling us that at one point, someone invented a fairy godmother. I would love to hear that tale. After this little cutaway scene, which is brilliant and really makes you wonder the life story behind the fairy godmother, we go back to Cinderella. Here she comes. She helps her with the terrible dresses. And then, of course, she brings back the dress for Cinderella. So, instead of Cinderella weeping at the grave of her mother and the dress raining down from the birds, it is the fairy godmother. They are interchangeable. I don't think I've seen a version that has both. Have I? So after the stepmother and the stepsisters go to the ball, here comes the fairy godmother. She's just going about her business. She has a throwaway line in which she says, "Oh, I'll just make time," which is now leading to this borrowed magic and why midnight is suddenly so important. Brilliant. So she borrows magic to help Cinderella get to the ball. The gown is it's 1700s. Think the Rococo period. You have the hip panniers, the robe à la française. It's really the frilly at the sleeves and like tight here, wide there, powdered wigs. That's the time period that this Cinderella is set in. And I always thought her dress was white because I saw this movie as a child back in the day on the Turner Classic Movies channel, TCM. But as an adult, I bought the DVD and my mind was blown at how colorful this version is, and her dress is actually pink. So okay. They have another number. Suddenly it happens and you're filled with light. It's a really pretty song called Suddenly. To get to the ball is a much more traditional, we're gonna get a pumpkin, it's gonna turn into a carriage, we're going to get some mice, it's gonna be your 4 horsemen. There's even a frog who has a ballet number to be her coachman. Oh gosh, this version is so great. It's so great. She gets to the ball, she enters, of course they have their moment. There's always this moment. There's a moment of recognition. It's one soul recognizing another soul. People call this love at first sight. I'm calling it connection. They have a connection. She enters, they dance. He's just gone from being bored out of his mind from every woman at the ball trying to win him over to suddenly being like, I don't know what it is about you, but my interest is piqued. She arrives as the Princess Incognita, by the way. Yes, they dance their way off. Everyone's like, who is she? They have a private number outside by the fountain, which I think is so fantastic because it's the prince who introduces the concept of love to Cinderella. She's never heard of it. She's like, why would love and marriage go together? This is how servile she has been raised to be. Love as a reason for marriage is still a fairly new concept. What, the last 100, 200 years-ish? After how many millennia of human beings existing? Remember, still a new concept. So he is bringing this concept to her, like, love, I want to love my partner. And she's just like, whoa, why should love have anything to do with it? I just love the role reversal. It's fantastic. Now, of course, midnight comes, she has to run away. As she's running away, her transformation is slowly degrading back. And then what happens is the classic, I found this shoe, it must fit someone, and he tries it on everyone in the kingdom except this one woman in a basement, apparently, because he doesn't find her. He does not find her. This is the first time in a Cinderella version that he does not find her on his quest with the shoe. So what he does is he puts the shoe on a pedestal and he glass domes it up, and now it can only be looked at, and months go by. Months go by. Now I mentioned this focuses on the servants' roles in life. There's an entire number called position and positioning. There's socially conditioning. Who you are, means there's nothing changeable, nothing is rearrangeable. Position and positioning are everything in life. Or at least he's told this through his manservant slash friend, John. John is in love with a woman who is above his station, therefore it is a hopeless cause, or so he tells the prince. And the prince is so amazed because he's never thought about it before. He's never thought about the social hierarchy and what it truly means to be living in that position, including his own role. It's a fantastic number. Aren't they all? Yes, in this version they are. They are all fantastic. So, while Prince Edward is feeling hopeless about his love, he decides, I'm going to elevate John's status so that he can chase the Lady Caroline, who is his lady love. Our prince takes a close look at the social hierarchy, recognizes there are roles, there are duties, there are responsibilities for everyone. No one is exempt. He elevates his friend John to a higher status so he can go chase the Lady Caroline. And then out of frustration, he punches a hole in the glass of the shoe and just throws it. He's like, I'm sick of this, I'm letting go, I'm tired of pining for a woman who essentially does not exist. And then, guess what happens? She finds the shoe. Well, she doesn't find the shoe, but her dog finds the shoe and brings it back. And we haven't even talked about the shoe yet. The shoe is silver. And it has crystals over it, so it could be glass, like glass crystals on this arched shoe. Very pretty. And, yes, once she discovers her shoes, she begins dancing in the meadow with it, you know, as you do, reliving that one magical night. You know what, we do this. And who should see her but John and his new lady love, Lady Caroline, out on a date. So he goes to get the prince comes and finds Cinderella, and now they're reunited. They have a romantic interlude in a meadow. And then he goes to her place to ask for her hand in marriage from the stepmother, who of course can't say no. And Cinderella gives this line, in my happiness, I forgive you all. And the stepmother is so offended by this. She goes, forgive me? How dare she forgive me? It's the best delivery ever. The best. She's such a good, wicked stepmother. Okay, now we're back at the palace. Here's the prince. He's almost accomplished his goals. Here's Cinderella. She's almost accomplished her goals. Prince Edward admits that he was looking in the wrong place for her because she's not the princess incognita. She is a local Euphranian, and he's going to marry her. Or so he thinks. Because the king is like, this could mean war. So that night, he sends an envoy to Cinderella telling her, you don't have to go back to the stepmother, but you can't stay here. Her poor heart breaks. Whose heart wouldn't? So, in an act of desperation, wait, the sun came back. Do these help? Little bit. In an act of desperation, knowing that the prince will follow her, her request is that if she chooses to go, they must besmirch her name and tell the prince that she was a lying, cheating, conniving woman who, I don't need these anymore. A lying, cheating, conniving woman who had no good in her. She just wants to appear completely horrible and the worst. This way he won't regret her leaving. It's a beautiful song! It's always a song, isn't it? Yes. So, they whisk her away to some secret location. The next day, Prince Edward is so furious that he tells his father, fine, pick your political marriage because you have destroyed any semblance of happiness that I might find in my life. So I'm going to destroy yours, and your line dies with me. He says our bed will be a sterile one because he refuses to take part in that union. So, a political marriage is about to occur. prince is really torn up about it. He has a whole scene where he's essentially going to confession and like saying prayers and talking to Cinderella, even though she can't hear him, and asking for her forgiveness. It's beautiful. You can really feel this prince genuinely developed feelings for her. It doesn't matter how briefly they interacted, the connection was there. And of course, she went to the ball, so I forgot to check. Leap of faith. Then she let them take her away, which I'm gonna give her another leap of faith for that. Like, that broke her freaking heart, and she still did it for the good of the kingdom, for the good of the prince. The feels. So, he's giving his prayers, he's begging forgiveness for going through with this political marriage, and honestly, guys, it is the fairy godmother who saves the day, because she is all dressed up, ready to go to a wedding, and she's like, this is not the right bride. Where the heck? What the? I worked too hard for this. So she finds Cinderella in some faraway place, and she's like, what are you doing here? I set it up perfectly so that you and the prince would be off together. You guys have things you need to do. You can't be here. And so she has to do something spectacular once again, and she dresses Cinderella up, brings her to the wedding. There's now a second bride after the bride has walked down the aisle. She plays this crystal trumpet. Oh my God, I was obsessed with this crystal trumpet when I was a kid. It must have been some beautiful glass work blown together. She blows a crystal trumpet to announce Cinderella's arrival. The first bride swoons. The wedding is in a cacophony. Everyone's in the back. They're like, what are we gonna do? You were supposed to be gone. We have a superfluous bride. And the fairy godmother takes it in her hands to be like, well, if you wrote the rules, you can unwrite them. And basically reminds the king that he has power. He has the power to change the old system that is clearly no longer working. And so he does. But wait, what about this other bride? Well, essentially, she just Cupid arrowed her, and the bride, the political bride, ends up locking eyes with that cousin from the start who was also looking for a bride, and it's love at first sight. And now all is resolved. The marriage takes place, the sovereignty is achieved, the fairy godmother saves the day, and this version is just so much fun. As I've told you, I've had fun telling you this version. Prince Edward has an entire character arc where he must, yes, grow and develop as a man, decide who he wants to become, the type of man or prince or king that he'll choose to be, has his own spiteful moments, but in the end, achieves his goals. He wanted to marry for love, and he does by the very end. And our Cinderella has overcome the abuse of her totally unappreciated family, her family by marriage, overcomes their abuse, overcomes life as a servant, has a period where she's actually living on her own. So she has achieved something that a lot of other Cinderellas don't have to go that far. Our Cinderella has accomplished her story arc. She has found her self-worth. She has learned to stand up for herself. And she has discovered that love is worth having, a concept she had never considered. And we see the fairy godmother as a person beyond just this magical being. Yes, she can do magic, but it comes with a price. It has limits, and if you don't follow the rules, there will be repercussions. Luckily, she knows how to fix those repercussions. The Slipper and the Rose, 1976, starring Richard Chamberlain as Prince Edward and Gemma Craven as our Cinderella. Go check it out because it is brilliant. I love, love, love this version. I love this version because it focuses on our roles and responsibilities, how we choose to approach situations in life, how we handle each other, and of course it has that fairy tale magic. And it's so colorful! Again, I had no idea it was so colorful until I got the DVD. Join us next week when we talk about Ella Enchanted. Yes! Alright, y'all. That sun is setting, which means it's time for me to be getting on home. Bye! Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.